South Carolina, sorry, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today's hearing, Director Cohen, is fundamentally about understanding your priorities as director and how you're going to lead CDC. Dr. Cohen, as Secretary of North Carolina's Department of Health and Human Services, during the COVID-19 pandemic, you mandated that students in K through 8th grade wear a mask regardless of their vaccination status and threatened to sue school districts that refused to comply. You imposed the school mask mandate after Governor Cooper, whose administration you work for, vetoed a bill that would have required in-person schooling. You've also spoken publicly that you made decisions on whether to allow fans to attend football games or whether to lift mask mandates based on feelings and what your friends at other state public health agencies were doing. None of this suggests that you will push for the much-needed changes at CDC or help the agency break from its insular culture. I'd like to ask you if you have any regrets about the school closures, the mask mandates, or any other restrictive measures you imposed in North Carolina.
Well, thank you, Representative Denton. I'm very proud of the work that we did in North Carolina. I feel like we did that in a way that was very inclusive. We listened. I had great partners on both sides of the aisle in North Carolina as we did that work. You have to put yourself back in 2020 when we had very little information. We barely had any tests. We had very little PPE. We certainly didn't have vaccines or treatment. There were very few tools at our disposal to protect folks.
Would you impose those type restrictions today?
Well, the good news is we're in a new place. So, right, and I'm looking forward to turning this new chapter with CDC as we look forward. I want to make sure we're learning the lessons from the pandemic about transparency and about creating those infrastructures that we need to make sure that we can detect and respond to diseases. But I want to make sure that we are in a place where we don't have to get into that place again, right? So we are detecting.
We trust the science and not the feelings and the opinions. A lot of it was subjective, the 6 foot social distancing and all this. But anyway, moving on. We had a hearing at CDC on CDC reform back in June, just after the COVID-19 public health emergency declaration was finally terminated. Some of the major takeaways I had from that hearing is that CDC is much too academic, too insular, and does too much. To be fair to you and the CDC, a lot of these failings have their roots here in Congress. CDC has never been authorized as a coherent agency. We in Congress have never told the CDC definitively what it's supposed to do and what it isn't supposed to do. This has led to mission creep and a CDC that is an agency of all trades but master of none. So I think the lack of underlying authorization is the root of a lot of CDC's problems. We in Congress need to revisit CDC's authorities to impose mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Some of these statutes date back decades and were originally given to the Surgeon General, who is now just sort of a glorified spokesman for the nation. These authorities are totally out of date and prior to COVID-19 were thankfully seldom utilized and never at the scale we just experienced. Dr. Cohen, it's a tragedy that CDC pushed vaccine, mask, and distancing mandates on the constituents of the 3rd District of South Carolina and all across the nation that closed small businesses, schools, and places of worship. And it's worth noting that these same restrictions were not applied to protests and riots that we saw all across the country. We owe it to the American people to provide coherent direction to CDC. Congress owes that to CDC as well. Set clear boundaries on your authority. And as I close, I'd encourage my colleagues to read the report I'm going to request be entered into the record by the Heritage Foundation. It provides what I think is a realistic roadmap that we can that can set us on a course to fix the failures and overreach we saw during COVID-19. Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I would ask to enter that into the record. And thank you for your leadership and for holding this hearing. Director Cohen, I wish you luck at CDC as you face these challenges. We're not here to thwart your efforts. We want to define your mission and help you to keep America safe, but do it in a very pragmatic, common sense, science-based way. And with that, I yield back.